Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om peace, peace, peace. And good evening. And the people in our story could certainly use a little peace and harmony. They have none of that. As you might remember from a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the birth of Sri Krishna, and Devaki, the mother, and Vasudeva, the father, have been put in prison by Devaki's evil brother Kamsa, who is the king of this kingdom. But he has received a message from the beyond that the seventh child, was it the seventh or eighth? I forget. Well, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, one of her children is going to kill him, and he doesn't want to wait for him. He's going to kill them all. He just likes killing little kids. So he's killed all the kids, and finally we're up to the number that's supposed to be his slayer. And so they are anxiously awaiting the birth, and the King Kamsa is beside himself with worry. He's got guards posted outside the prison to make sure that they capture the young child when he's born. But the universe has other plans. So if Atma would like to begin, we will begin with Devaki was about to usher into the world.
Now, Devaki was about to usher into the world as Savior, and she, along with her husband, bewailed her lot and beat her breast and forehead, saying, "Oh, darling, be not born of me to be smashed to death by the wretch. Oh, God, what a hard lot we have. Why do you not come to help us when we're going to be drowned in the shoreless ocean of misery? Are we not your servants? Proper the poor and helpless? Oh, come to our rescue. Delay no more. It's too much for us. We cannot bear any more." And with this, both the wife and the husband fell into a swoon in the gloom of that unconsciousness. And suddenly a light flashed, and before that light, those thick, dark layers of the clouds of misery, the accumulated effect of several past years, vanished all at once, and the sun of gladness and peace, in the shape of a smiling and beautiful youth of 16, holding mace and discus, conch shell and lotus in his 4 hands, rose above the horizon of their mental firmament, shedding benign and nectarian luster over their souls, healing all their mental wounds and cheering and exhilarating them with his sweet smile. As the hungry, emaciated Equimox, after living in his snow house for weeks and weeks together, spending nearly all the food gathered there before he entered it with his family to pass away the longest night on earth, when that night is almost spent and the equally longest day is approaching, leaps up with joy and springs out of his den, trap in hand, to hail the gladdening light of the Aurora Borealis. So the hearts of Devaki and Vasudeva leap with joy at seeing the enchanting face of the smiling and sweet-looking lad that came running towards them and thus charmingly accosted them. "Oh, father and mother, weep no more. I've come at last to your rescue, and to the rescue of all the good. Earth shall have no complaint no more. The days of the wicked have been numbered. The wretched Kamsa is not to hold his scepter long, and he has no power to kill me. I'm too subtle, too strong for him. Open your eyes and see me as your child. Carry me, Father, to the house of your friend Nanda in Gokula. His wife, Yashoda, has given birth to a daughter just now. Exchange me for that daughter. Bring her back to the dungeon, leaving me on the lap of Yashoda, who will be sleeping at the time. No, nothing shall bar your path. And with this, the soul-solacing charmer vanished, and the gloom again set in. But their hearts were lighter. They opened their eyes to see the most charming baby ever a parent was blessed with. They forgot their wretched condition for a while, looking at the smiling baby playing with its tiny limbs. The mother kissed the sweet face, forgot her danger. Then they awoke to realize the real state of affairs. Both the husband and the wife shuddered. The sweet instructions of the fascinating lad in the vision then flashed into their minds. Vasudeva clasped the child at once in his bosom to start for Gokula. But he found that his legs were fettered, along with those of his wife, by the same chain. We did not know what to do. In his madness, he gave a jerk, and his legs were released. And he sprang upon his feet and ran towards the door of his dungeon. The massive iron barn doors were locked with threefold locks. But the sentinels were all asleep, and therefore fearlessly he gave a push forward, and the gates were unlocked and flew open of their own accord, making a grating sound which chilled the heart of the father, lest the sound should wake the sleeping sentinels. He ran forward like a madman, but alas, there was another gate, equally massive and similarly locked, with sentinels snoring beside it. His first experience had made him bold and hopeful, so he gave this too a push, and of its own accord, it flew open, and he ran through it. 5 more, equally strong, bolted and locked doors he similarly passed. The sleeping sentinels knew nothing of it. He was now a free man. God's sky was over his head. The free breeze was blowing over him to take away the fusty smell of the dungeon off his person. It was raining heavily. Pitch-dark clouds enhanced the darkness of the night. He wrapped the baby in a portion of his own dirty cloth to save it from being drenched completely in the rain. But what course would he take to reach his destination? There was darkness all around. Not a single thing was visible. He was at a standstill. Suddenly the lightning flashed, and he was able to make out something about his way. So he went on with difficulty, finding out his path with the help of the occasional flashes of lightning. Although it was raining in torrents, he found that somehow or other, he and his child were not drenched in any way, and he thanked his God for this.
Well, that was quite a paragraph. Believe it or not, that was one paragraph. So anyway, one thing we can learn from this is that no matter how bad life gets, you never know when it's going to get better. And we can certainly feel that nothing that we've had to endure could be as horrible as what Devaki and Vasudeva had to endure, watching all of their children being slaughtered and being imprisoned all that time, chained up. So that's really the message here, is that God will come to the rescue. You know, there was an interesting story told by a devotee who had stayed at the Udbodhan house when Holy Mother was there. And he was coming back late at night. I think he was still a student going to school. So it was a late night, and he was having trouble seeing. It was very stormy. And he was quite worried about how he was going to find his way across all the paddy fields. And suddenly a light appeared before him and showed him the way all the way back to Holy Mother's house, and she was there waiting for him. So miracles like that do happen. So let us see what other miraculous things, other than a 3-page paragraph and a few miraculous 7 gates opening miraculously and chains breaking miraculously. Let's see what else we can come up with here.
At last he came near the brink of the river Jamna, which heaved and flowed so rapidly with innumerable eddies and whirlpools that it dried up the blood in his heart to imagine fording the river at such an hour of the night and in such weather, for no ferry boat was available at this time. Oh, I did not know what to do. It was almost hopeless. But just then, a jackal was seen to get into the river. It began to walk over the water to go to the other side. Well, Vasudeva took the creature to be a godsend, soon followed it. The water did not reach his knees, but alas, through his carelessness, the child dropped into the river. And he began to search for it in vain. The rapid current had carried it away. Oh, God, why do you play such pranks with me, wretched as I am? Oh, where am I to find my child? And thus saying, he began to beat his breast and forehead in utter agony of despair. And lo, the child was floating right under his nose. He took it up, clasped it firmly in his bosom, kissed it again, and followed the path pointed out by the jackal. And at last he reached the other side. He thanked God and ran towards Gokula and reached there. And then it was not very difficult for him to find out the house of his friend Nanda, the shepherd king.
So another incident where faith allows you to walk over the water. We had some parables a few months ago to that effect. Some of the parables of Ramakrishna, where because of their supreme faith in God's name, they were able to walk over the waters. And so here, he had to have the faith that God was guiding him with this jackal to show him where to cross the waters. But he still has all these doubts every once in a while. It just shows how our minds can go from great faith to great doubt in an instant. And yet we need to retain our faith in God, because God will be there for us. All right, so we will now read our next interesting miracle.
To his astonishment, he found the door of the house open, as if ready to receive him. He once entered into the compound. The house had been frequented by him before, so he could easily search out the room of Yashoda, whom he saw sleeping there, along with her maids, and playing on her lap with the newborn baby, about whose birth, as it were, she and all in the room were fully unconscious. A moment only was needed for him to place his own child upon the lap of Yashoda and take her child up and clasp it in his bosom. Instead, although it rent his heart to do so, what could he do? There was no alternative. He rushed with her, it was a female child, into the street, and from there ran to the Yamuna, crossed it, and hurried to the prison of Kamsa. The gates, which had been left open by him, were still open. The sentinels were still sleeping beside them. Without any delay, he passed through the 7 gates, and as soon as he reached the side of his anxiously waiting and weeping consort and presented her with the stolen child of another, the gates shut, bolted, and locked of their own accord, just as they had been before. Oh, how beautiful the child looked, as amidst the gloomiest clouds, the merriest lightnings play at hide and seek, beautifying the whole nature with their glory, as they now and then peep out of the clouds, unmindful of the terrible rollings of the thunders, the roar of the hurricane, and the thick, piercing showers of heavy rains, accompanied with pelting hailstones that devastate the fated earth. So the tiny baby smiled and played and laughed on the laps of the weeping parents, in whose hearts the health storm of misery was making havoc, unmindful of their wretched and hopeless condition and her own ill fate, as she was destined to be smashed to death half an hour later.
So we have many miracles. First, all the guards just happen to have been so drowsy and drunk that they all fall asleep. The chains miraculously break. The gates, the locks on the gates magically open. He magically is able to find his way across the countryside through lightning strikes, which somehow don't wake up any of the guards, and that he's able to cross the river Yamuna with the help of the jackal. And one miracle they don't even mention, considering how difficult childbirth is, it's quite amazing that she just slept through the whole thing. So Yashoda somehow gives birth to this lovely little baby girl without any knowledge of it by her or her maid. So they have all been put to sleep magically so that none of the events are known to them. And then he magically gets back and all the gates magically shut up again. They didn't mention that the chains went back, but I imagine they must have, or the guards in Kamsa would have some suspicion. So we're not done with miracles yet. We have another one coming up, and it regards this little baby girl who's just as, in her own right, as miraculous as the baby Krishna himself. So let's read on.
Morning approached, and the guards of Kamsa suddenly woke. They woke up from their deep sleep. They were terribly afraid for their undutifulness. When each one saw that all of them had committed the same guilt, and he was not the only offender, they regained the color in their countenance and rushed to look into the prison. They saw the child. Although the parents would not allow them to have it, they snatched it away from them and went directly up to their master and offered it to him. When Kamsa saw that it was a female child, he came directly to the prison to inquire whether any stratagem had been played by the parents to deceive him and to save the promised male child. After strict inquiry, he could not get the least scent of the actual fact that had taken place. So, when Vasudeva imploringly asked him not to kill a female child, for it could not do him the harm which he might only expect from a male issue, he roughly answered him, "You wretch, you take me to be a fool that you want to play tricks upon me? This enemy of mine can assume all forms, and do you think I'm going to save him because he has taken up the garb of a female? So saying, he went away with his guards to put the baby to death, which all this while been smiling, playing, nay, even sometimes laughing in a weird manner, made the heart of the monster tremble. There was the stone before him. He firmly caught the legs of the tiny baby, which was as merry as it could be, lifted it up in the air and down. He wanted to smash it upon the stone, but lo, slipped out from his firm, demeaning grip, and laughing the merriest laugh a baby had ever laughed, and assuming in the air a bigger form with 8 hands, looking tauntingly down upon Kamsa and laughing still the more. "Wretch," cried the strange girl, "dost thou think to avert the will of the Almighty? Lo, thy destroyer is flourishing in Gokula, in the house of Nanda." And so saying, she vanished. Kamsa trembled. For some time he remained like one stupefied. And then his own satanic nature raged in full fury, and he sent spies at once to Gokula to see whether Nanda had got a child or not. And his seeming goodness, the result of intense fear, he ordered his guards to keep his sister and brother-in-law in simple imprisonment, take off their chains, and supply them with the necessary wants, thinking it to be useless to torment them any more. At the end, for which they had to undergo such inhuman treatment from them, had been baffled by God. The birth of the Savior dispelled 3/4 of his parents' troubles, who now hoped that their child might still be saved, to release them from bondage at some time in the near future. Their hearts were lighter, and they thanked the Lord for it.
You wonder why they, obviously the goddess, why she led on as to where the child was. Seems like it would have been smarter to keep it a secret. But there has to be more drama, you see. So in order for the divine play, this is certainly a divine play, isn't it? Can't you see that this was written by the master dramatist herself? And so in order to have the necessary storyline to the plot, Kamsa is going to have to try to kill this little child that has gone off to another kingdom. He's not the king of this kingdom, so it's not going to be quite as easy for him to do it. But he's going to have to come up with some clever ways of trying to get rid of this child. It's funny, he doesn't seem to ask how the child got there. All sorts of mysteries here. But he has accepted the fact that the person who is going to slay him has escaped and is now being raised in a neighboring kingdom. And he now has to find more clever ways of trying to eliminate him. But at least he's got a slightly kind heart in keeping Devaki and Vasudeva still in prison, but in nicer arrangements. So let's see what happens next. What is going to be his first move to try to eliminate the person who will eliminate him?
Early in the morning, all at Gokula came to know that a beautiful prince had been born the previous night to Nanda, their beloved king, and their simple hearts were filled with unbounded joy. They hurried to see their king, congratulate him on this joyful occasion, carrying on their shoulders their modest presents of curd, butter, and condensed milk. As soon as they saw Nanda, these simple-hearted shepherds began to dance in joy in the courtyard of his house, unmindful of breaking the pots containing their presents and thus wasting them, some of which now actually flowed out of a few broken pots, which they had carelessly dropped down on the floor in their ecstasy. The contents of these pots whitened, made the compound slippery and muddy. You can describe the incessant laughs from all around occasioned by the sudden fall of a newcomer laden with pots filled with the aforementioned presents, their merriment breaking still other pots on their heads or shoulders and spilling the contents on the floor, making it more muddy and slippery. Some rushed towards him on the pretense of giving him a helping hand and smeared his whole body and face with the mixture of curd, butter, and mud. And he too was not a man to remain silent and indifferent to all this, and in his turn he smeared the bodies of the whole company with the same mixture. So the merry struggle in besmearing one another now became universal. Some ran into the kitchen, begged a large quantity of pasted turmeric, intended for coloring and seasoning the curries, made it liquid by mixing it with some curd and rushing into the compound and throwing it upon the whole congregation, made them all look yellow. The inventors of this mixture were highly praised for their skill and ingenuity by those simple-minded rustics. All of them now began to dance. Some brought tambourines, cymbals, lyres, and flutes, and began to play upon them, and all of them danced and sang in chorus. The praises of God, thus what began in pure merriment, ended in solemn rapture. When they felt tired, all of them went into the neighboring, swift-flowing Yamuna with its clearest and most limpid water, bathed, washed off all their dirt there, and returned to their simple king's modest palace, where a simple but hearty and substantial repast was awaiting them. And thus ended the rustic festival of Nanda and his simple subjects, which even up to this date is observed by almost all the Hindus of India.
So quite a scene where such joy that breaking all the pots was seen as fun rather than as a tragedy. Interesting, you know, sometimes when all sorts of crazy things happen to us, we can laugh it off, and sometimes we end up in tears or in agony or in anger. But obviously, if we could always be in joy about difficult things, our life would be a lot better if we could just laugh things off, even though everything seems to kind of go wrong for a while. But they are all in great joy because they have a baby prince, and they are completely ignorant of the fact that this was not actually Yashoda's child, but the baby Krishna, who is now going to be raised by his adopted parents in what is a very different kind of kingdom, a very pastoral kingdom, where shepherds and shepherdesses and lots of countryside kind of surround the whole ambience of the kingdom. And so, of course, we're going to have lots of stories of Krishna liking butter and things like that. So, because the cows are going to be giving lots of nice butter anyway. So let's read on and see how this first few months and years of the baby Krishna's life goes on here.
When Kamsa heard through his spies that a male child was born to Nanda, he sent a female demon to poison the child. She assumed the form of a very fair young lady and poisoned the nipples of her breast and went to Gokula. Well, people took her to be a lady of a high and wealthy family. And when she directly went in the inner compartments of Nanda's palace, no one resisted her. She went straight up to where Yashoda was sitting with the sweet-looking baby on her lap and congratulated her in having such a beautiful child, whom she longed to take upon her lap, only once, if the good mother would kindly permit her, so that she might imprint a kiss upon the sweet face of the fairest child she had ever seen. Well, the simple mother was too good to offer any resistance to such a loving request. And the next moment, the child was on the lap of the demoness, who not only kissed it several times, but thrust the nipple of her breast into its mouth in order to suckle it, as she averred. Although she could impose upon the simple-minded shepherd girl, she could not hide her evil intention from the view of the all-knowing God of the universe, who in the form of a baby began, as soon as the nipple was thrust into his mouth, to suck it so much that at last he began to suck the very life out of her. And in the meanwhile, she had carried the baby away from the house within the twinkling of an eye. And Yashoda could not suspect any danger from her. The wicked demoness, seeing herself thus outwitted, and in fear of losing her life, assumed a real form, which was most ugly and terrible to look at, and as big as a palmyra tree. But all her powers were too small to save herself from being sucked out of life by the seeming baby. She fell down dead on the roadside of Gokula, uttering a loud cry, terrifying all the people there by the cry, as well as by her hideous and gigantic figure. The name of the demoness was Putana, and the baby, in the meanwhile, was playing on the carcass of the hideous monstrous. In search of her child, Yashoda ran out of the house like one mad, and she was running towards the terrible monstrous when a shepherd girl, with the baby in her bosom, came hurrying towards her and gave the child to the mother, narrating all about the wonderful incident, how she had found her baby laughing and playing upon the breast of the dead demoness. And whoever heard this wondered what kind of a baby this must be. The advent of the demoness in their peaceful retreat created a great anxiety in the minds of all the people there. They no longer doubted that she must have been sent by the wicked King Kamsa to kill Nanda's child, as by this time everyone cursed him inwardly for destroying his own sister's children. They therefore naturally concluded that the archdemon had taken a fancy to put their innocent king's child also to death, he being a bosom friend of Vasudeva. Henceforth, the shepherds of Gokula determined to be particularly careful in admitting any stranger in their peaceful town, little deeming that the wicked demons were too wily, subtle, and cunning for them.
So that's the first miracle of the baby Krishna, to be able to kill the wicked demoness Putana by virtually sucking the life out of her. So again, the force of the avatar is infinite and can destroy all evil that comes about, and that's why they come to earth, to take the evil out of the world. The world has been filled with evil, and so God has to incarnate in order to right the balance between good and evil. And this is the first incidence we see where Krishna is able to do that. And so, of course, it's symbolic that he's able to remove evil at will. And so they were at least suspicious. I would think I'd be rather suspicious that this child was something special, and they also were correct in assuming that it was Kamsa that had something to do with it. His reputation as a baby killer had spread to the friends of Vasudeva, and so they were very much aware that he was killing all of their children, and so he figured that perhaps, or they figured that perhaps he was now killing the children of neighboring kings and friends of Vasudeva. So we are going to have another miracle in our next paragraph. So let's see what that's going to be.
Once the baby was placed under a cart laden with pots filled with curd and other things, a demon imperceptibly settled upon the cart and broke it in no time, intending to crush the child to death. But not a single plank, pot, or anything fell upon it, and the huge demon lay dead on the spot, being kicked to death instead by the seeming baby. Once the mother Yashoda was caressing and fondling her pretty little child by clasping it on her bosom, suddenly it grew so very heavy that she could not keep it there and was forced to place it on the bare floor of the compound. The demon, finding this opportunity, wanted to carry it high up in the air, then dash it against a rock, and thus make an end of its life. And accordingly, in the form of a whirlwind, he swooped upon it and wanted to lift it up. He succeeded in doing so for a while by firmly clasping it to his bosom. But no sooner did he rise up a little higher in the air than it became so heavy that the demon fell down upon the ground under its weight, and roaring like thunder was crushed to death in the center of the town. People rushed towards the spot where he fell and were astonished to find that the newborn child of their king was crawling with a smiling face upon the huge carcass of a hideous monster. They at once took it up and ran to give it to its weeping mother, who was madly running hither and thither to find her child. Now their gladness knew no bounds when the shepherds restored the child to her, and no woman could be so grateful to her benefactors as she was on the occasion to those kind of friends.
So the understatement of the millennia would be, I don't think this is an ordinary child. So it's interesting that she's still worried about protecting her little child when he obviously is very good at taking care of himself, probably much better at it than anyone could possibly protect him. He is doing all the protecting himself, and yet they're still worried about protecting him. So it's interesting how we don't see the reality of things when they're miraculous like this, and we continue to try to think of things in normal terms. So this is their problem, is that they're continuing, even though they keep seeing these miraculous events, they somehow still take on rather ordinary they see things in rather ordinary terms rather than in such miraculous terms, and want to be parents to this poor little helpless child who's obviously not helpless. All right, several other incidences are mentioned, so we're going to have another one here.
Several such incidents are mentioned in the Puranas as having taken place in the early life of our hero, who successfully put the demonic authors of them all to death, and he began to increase in stature and strength, beauty and majesty rapidly. Some people like to look upon these demons as mere disastrous accidents, which the baby of Yashoda somehow or other escaped, and these, getting their color from the hands of the poets, have been manufactured into demon stories. Modern science has taught such critics that the universe is made up of 80 elements, which have certain fixed characteristics of their own. Those characteristics are always the same under the same circumstances and go by the name of natural laws.
He, of course, was writing at a time when they hadn't discovered all the natural elements and they hadn't created any unnatural elements, so he's only got 80 in his list. All right.
Atheists, skeptics, and agnostics, therefore, find no necessity of admitting a God as the creator of the universe, since those 80 elements and the laws which they obey are sufficient to explain all phenomena. They've reduced the whole universe and its working to a combination of dull, dead, and inert matter and material forces. No intelligent power is behind all these to order and regulate them. The aimless, thoughtless stream of creation is eternally flowing between its two banks of cause and effect, upon the bed of space and time. Coming from and going to the unknown and unknowable, and the self-consciousness and intelligence of man, what are they? They are merely the effects of the combinations of certain elements in certain proportions. Death dissolves the body as well as the self. However rational these conclusions may appear, which I leave to my audience to refute, there can be no doubt that they are extremely uninteresting, dull, prosaic, and undesirable. The universe in that case is nothing more than an automatic machine, a soulless, active organism. Because we cannot imagine the existence of an automatic machine unless it has been previously arranged or set in order by an intelligent being, nor of a soulless body having life in it. Similarly, it is impossible for us to imagine the existence of such a world. As in a living being, life depends for its existence upon the soul. That is, with the entrance or exit of the soul in the organism. Life also will have to enter into or go away from it. Similarly, the cosmic life must depend for its existence upon a soul behind, but for which no life can exist.
All right, this paragraph goes on for almost 3 pages, so we'll have to remember where we are. We might even start a little bit further back next time, but it's worth making a few comments here. Of course, this is pre-quantum mechanics, and with quantum mechanics, we know that things work probabilistically, and that leaves room for miracles. Things that are completely improbable are still not impossible in the realm of quantum physics, even though it might be billions to one. And certainly we know in the life of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother of things that seemed miraculous, not quite as bizarre as these incidences, but still somewhat miraculous, like Holy Mother assuming the form of various goddesses at times when needed, and the story that I related earlier tonight, and people seeing Sri Ramakrishna in various forms. So these kinds of things can happen. However, it's also possible that around such miraculous events, other details are added in order to make the story even more interesting and more relevant and illustrate various spiritual principles, very much like mythologies and fairy tales, where many of the elements are all symbolic of various things that help us to direct our lives in the correct way. So we can read this in many ways as actual history and as mythologized history, where things have been elaborated in order to illustrate things that are important for us to know, both spiritually and as ways of living our life. So we might look at some of those elements as we read on in future sessions together, and see how many different layers we can peel off of this fantastic story of the birth and young life of Sri Krishna. All right, let's close with a chant. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.